House in the Woods. Back in year 2000, my friends and I, around 15 to 16 at the time, lived together in a neighborhood. It was a well-respected area, little to no crime, nice people, and a beautiful forest around it. A few weeks or so prior, my friend had told us his cat had jumped out of a window and ran into the woods. They set traps up to catch the animal, not harm it, but only caught raccoons. They had recently rescued it from an animal shelter, so they didn't want to become too attached, but it was still so sad. Anyways, we always used to go down to the creek and camp and make fires in these woods. One of my friends discovered an old house one day alone, 3 miles or so in the woods. He liked photography and often took nature pictures and said it was covered in vines with shrubbery growing all over it, but he didn't enter, so we thought it'd be cool for us to go and explore it. So a few days later, 2 friends of mine and I set out on a sunny afternoon, and like he said, we run into this house. It looked about 30 to 40 years old, but beat up. There were no signs of any trails or paths that could have led there. It was completely isolated and abandoned. Before we entered, my friend left his camera inside a bag outside near the entrance. We walked inside to find old scattered mail everywhere. We didn't read all of it, but some were about foreclosure, warnings, etc. The floors were dirty, wood rotten, nails and sharp rusty tools in one corner, and just an overwhelming stench of something dead inside. We continued searching for about 20 minutes and found a staircase. One of my friends went upstairs, but stopped as he heard a screeching, angry-like noise. Turned out it was a possum, but we got spooked and decided to leave. After being in there for about 30 minutes or so, we walked outside and my friend grabs his bag. We began walking about a mile or so when he realizes his bag felt lighter. He looked inside to find his camera was missing. We went back, but had no luck finding it. He assumed he forgot it on the ground somewhere. It was getting dark, so we thought we'd come back another day and look. It rained the next few days, but we eventually returned to the house. When we got there, we saw it had looked just the same, but damp because of leaks and rainfall. Everything was gross, but as we kept looking, I came across this filthy rag that looked like it covered something. I lift it up with a stick and see it's his camera, perfectly intact, no smudges, no dirt, not wet, just like he left it. He grabs it, and by this time it was getting dark, so we hustle back so not to get lost. When we return to his house, he removes the memory card and we look up images. At first we see all his pictures like trees, landscapes, etc. But as we progress, we see blurry images of nothing it looks like. But then came across something horrific. A few images after the blurry photos showed dead squirrels, birds, rodents, not intact though. Some had been cut open or smashed to death. Their eyes were dangling out, their limbs were cut off, just a disgusting sight. However, the next few images were really disturbing. There, we saw a cat that was lying like an X, like it was dissected. Its abdomen was sliced open, organs spewing out, tail removed, and wrapped around its neck. But not too long after, my friend recognized the color, size, look of it. It was his cat that had run off. We all immediately became very frightened and sick. I actually wanted to throw up. He became distressed but confused. We all did. We didn't know what to make of it. He ended up deleting all the photos, even his landscape ones, and put his camera away in his closet. After that, we never went anywhere in that area again, or barely in the woods for that matter. I never wanted to think about it ever again. It's something I forgot actually about until my friends and I reminisced about our past. It's truly frightening to think who did that, and worst of all, how close they lived. Creepy teens in the woods. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a house that sat directly across from the school I attended. However, there was about a half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because it was so straightforward. My mother informed me that she and her siblings walked through the woods to school when they were younger, so it felt like a natural and safe thing for her. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school all on my own. I felt pretty at home in the woods as I had been raised around them. The walk was pretty direct with very little issues, aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem. It was the fact that on each side there was a steep bank that I had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. It had rained the day before, so my steps, which were normally loud, were fairly silent. This might have just saved my life. It at least saved me from something terrible. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for my part in it. I was doing the supernova section and wasn't feeling very ready to make a speech in front of everybody, explaining it. Anyways, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slightly wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of in order to pull myself up. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I could climb up the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I heard it again. I did. I heard a couple boys talking, getting closer to me. I smashed myself up against the bank and listened for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me to stay away, that something was wrong. The boys came so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash. As luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I listened as the boys talked. "Yeah, she comes through here all the time. She'll be coming around in just a minute." My heart sank. I was the only person that walked this trail to and from school, and they were in my direct path. This isn't to say that no one else was ever in the woods, but in all the time I used this trail, I had never seen another person. To get to the woods from my house, I had to cross the road and walk through a small flat area with no trees. And from the school side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anyone from either side could see me going in or out of the woods easily. I stood plastered to the wall of mud, waiting for them to catch me, but they walked around a little bit, smoked a couple of cigarettes, and started getting frustrated. "Where the fuck is she, man? You said she'd be here, so where is she?" Maybe she's at school today. Anyways, we gotta go or we're gonna miss our bus." The high schoolers caught their bus to the high school at the elementary school. This told me two things. One, they were obviously in high school, so much older than me. And two, they had some seriously bad intentions towards me. I heard them leaving, but I didn't dare move. I waited a good 30 minutes or so before I darted out of the creek and towards home. I will never know exactly what those two boys had planned to do to me that day, and I'm not sure I want to. So, creepy high schoolers waiting in the woods for a little girl. Let's not meet. Chased and stalked through the woods at night. Hey, I'm female, 24 years old and from the UK. Despite a few creepy instances as a child, there's only been one time in my adult life that I've ever felt true primal fear. My apology if it's a little long, but trust I am being as concise as possible and need to explain the surroundings a little at first. I live in a village in the middle of the English countryside. To paint an accurate picture of its size, it has a population of 4,000, but feels more like 1,000 due to its spread out nature and being surrounded on all sides by lots of fields, farms, and woods that eventually connects onto a pretty famous forest. It's kinda in the middle of nowhere, and because of this, has notoriously bad phone and internet connections. Having lived here all my life, I know the place like the back of my hand. I know where all the public footpaths through the woods and fields are, where they connect, which are shortcuts, where to cross deep streams, etc. I have gone on walks in this area throughout my childhood, with parents and alone, as an adult as well. Nothing bad has happened. I felt safe here. This story takes place last summer in July, after I moved back home from university. Had yet to get a job and smoked a lot of weed, a habit my parents despised and which I tried to keep hidden from them by going on evening walks, multiple pre-rolled joints hidden away in my hoodie pocket. As usual, this day, they both got home at 5 p.m. We had dinner but chatted for a while longer than usual, as my mom had had quite a hectic day and was telling me about it. Because of this, I ended up heading out for my walk an hour later than routine, at around 7 p.m. But as it was summer, the sun was still shining, so honestly, I didn't really notice that it would start getting dark while I was still out. The woodland closest to my house is less than 5 minutes away, and you enter through a gate in the farmer's field. You can see across the open area quite far until the first set of small woods obscures your view. That's where I was heading, as I knew this track takes under 2 hours and leads back onto the same path I was standing on now. More than enough time to smoke the 3 joints in my pocket and for the smell to leave my clothing, I had thought. The entire area is very popular for dog walkers, so it's not unusual to see other people while you're out and about, and as this is a village, everybody says hello to everybody. I lit my first joint and started walking. I'm just in my own world for a while, until I was less than 100 feet before the entrance to the woods. An elderly man was coming out of them, throwing a ball for his collie dog. I finished my joint and stubbed it out. As I got closer, I recognized it was John, who lived on the road next to mine and knew my grandpa. We stopped and said hello as I stroked his dog Max. While talking, I see another man coming out of the woods. No dog, bright green jacket, very tall, and had a good 10 years on me age-wise. Me and John chat another minute and say goodbye. He warns me not to stay out here too long, as it will start getting dark soon. True, the sky was bright pink and orange. The sun was indeed beginning to set. I hadn't really noticed. I continued down the path towards the man. When we were nearly passing each other, I looked up to make brief eye contact, smile and say hello, like everyone here does, even if you don't recognize the person. My eyes instantly met his. He was already looking at me, his dark eyes locked on mine. He wasn't smiling. I didn't know him at all, but I knew something was wrong. It was in his eyes. I swallowed my politeness and looked at the ground as we passed. I had lived in my university city the past couple of years, so I knew a red flag when I saw one, and my country bumpkin manners evaporated. I quickened my pace a little, and before entering the woods slightly looked back. The guy was still walking in the same direction following John. I felt relieved, laughed, cursed the weed for making me paranoid while lighting up another joint, and started walking into the woods. It takes about 30 minutes to follow the path through the woods to the end. The pathway exit opened into another field that led to another set of woods. The sky was now violet, the dimming light having been obscured to me by the trees. I was already smoking my last joint and was near the entrance to the second set of woods when I felt it. Fear, complete, crippling, absolute fear worked its way like electric through every layer of flesh. I never felt anything like it before or since, but I knew what it was. I whipped around. Standing at the exit of the first set of woods was the man. I could still make out his green jacket in the fading light. He fucking doubled back. And very quickly too. I had looked back several times while in those trees, and he hadn't been there. For a second I froze, as did he. He knew I'd seen. To sprint the distance between us would take him about 5 minutes. He was obviously in good shape. I threw the spliff and fucking bolted into the woods. The only way I could go. I couldn't dare look behind me. I sprinted for a couple minutes before taking a sharp left turn off the path into the trees, hoping to throw him off a bit, but I couldn't see a fucking thing. The light was already darkening, and the trees made it 100 times worse, especially as I was now in the thick of them. Their branches catching on my clothes like fingers, whipping and scratching my bare legs so bad I bled. I ran and ran, my lungs protesting in pain, hating me for smoking so much, while my heart was throwing itself against my ribcage, trying to escape. I couldn't anymore. I threw myself onto the ground behind a particularly thick trunk, my back against it, knees to my chest, hand thrown over my mouth to stifle my labored breathing, desperately trying to pump air into my lungs for the next sprint. I listened for the first time. A few seconds pass silently. Then I hear him. Heavy footfall snapping twigs behind me, and about 20 feet to my left. I dare not look in case he sees me. I have my phone, but know I have little chance of signal being where I was, and knew he'd either hear me talking or see the light from the display. I'm not ashamed to say at this point I start to cry, the tears falling silently down my cheeks. "What the fuck?" I hear a deep voice exclaim. "Where are you? I know you're here. I saw you." I have to clasp both hands across my mouth to stop my scream escaping. I hear him moving around. I panic, and I find enough courage to slowly peek from behind the tree. He was about 10 feet behind me, less than 20 feet to the left, with his back to me. I move back, and my eyes search the area around me. I pick up a pretty heavy rock. I carefully check on him again. His back is still turned, but he's searching through the trees, hunched down lower to the ground now. I make a snap decision, and with everything I had left, I threw the rock behind me and to the right. It clattered through the branches of the trees and made one hell of a noise. I watched him immediately bolt in its direction, laughing. He fucking laughed. I paused a little, hearing his footsteps get quieter, until I thought I wouldn't be so visible to him if I moved and threw myself forward. I ran, trying to put as much distance between us as possible, but I was also aware that I was getting further and further away from home. I knew there had to be a stream somewhere close. If I've just found the stream, I can follow it, as it borders the land and ran parallel to some of the footpaths. I ran, and I ran until the trees finally cleared, and I can just make out another field through them on the other side. I thank God and push myself a little bit further until I'm out of the trees, and the ground disappears from below my feet. and I go head over shoulders down the stream embankment. I crash into the water below, my open mouth and lungs filling with muddy water. As I splutter it out, I feel both relieved to have found the stream and terrified he's heard me. My phone is now ruined. I slowly make my way downstream as quiet as possible, listening out for him the whole time as the stream borders the woods, looking up periodically just in case. After a while, maybe half an hour, I notice the trees begin to thin out and realized this is the edge of the woods where I would have been exiting and where the pathway connected to the original one I'd started on. If I ran, I could get home in less than 20 minutes. As quiet as I could, I dragged myself on my stomach back up the embankment army style, wanting to stay as low as possible. I peeked over the top. I could just make out the opening of the woods, the exit path about 50 feet away. I sat and scanned the forest line for a couple minutes, my eyes trying to make out movement despite it now being pitch black. Nothing. I couldn't hear anything either. I pushed myself up and sprinted as fast as I could across the field onto the pathway. I knew the gate I'd enter through was in the adjoining field. It wasn't far away. I was so happy. "You fucking bitch!" came a screech from across the field. I swear, my legs nearly gave out then and there. He had been waiting for me. I turned my head and saw him sprinting out of the woods at full pelt. I screamed and pushed myself further, tears coating my face. All I could do is run. I crossed into the main field now, and I could see the moonlight shining off the metal gate. My house was just 5 minutes away after that. I've never focused on anything as much as that gate. He was faster than me and getting closer, screaming at me the whole time about how he was going to slit my throat. I ran and I ran, pushing myself up and over the gate and ran up the road. I dared look as I made the turning for my road. He was still fucking following me. I raced up my driveway and threw myself through the door, running into the living room, crying and screaming hysterically, pointing behind me towards the door. My dad ran outside while my mom grabbed a hold of me as I collapsed, shaking. As it turns out, my parents had already called the police. As I said, I was going out for an hour or so at 7, and it was now past 12 a.m., and I hadn't answered when they called my now broke phone, very unlike me. We called the police again to explain. They came, and I gave a full statement. Both my parents and the police were horrified. Nothing like this happens here. There hasn't been a reported rape or murder in the last 100 years. But one look at me, and it was obvious I was telling the truth. I was covered head to toe in cuts and bruises, soaking wet and covered in mud and blood. I won't go into how this experience changed me. It's depressing. But I will say the thing that scares me the most is that they never even had a suspect. Despite him following me so closely, he was gone by the time my dad ran outside. That guy is still out there, and who knows what he's really capable of.